Hello, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Today, I'm going to be presenting my refutative argument why I believe anabolic steroids should remain illegal for purchase within the United States. And as I said, as the refutative side, I am arguing for the status quo. Put simply, anabolic steroids are both physically and mentally damaging, and their health risks have been known for quite some time. It doesn't make sense to legalize a substance that's been linked to numerous side effects, especially when the usage is purely for aesthetics. It's not for the betterment of society if we're allowing this substance to be purchased over the counter if it's simply going to cause health effects. So when used for medical doses, such as people on testosterone replacement therapy, doses are kept at a very low level due to the danger of these compounds. According to the Mayo Clinic, some side effects that men see when abusing anabolic steroids include the growth of breast tissue or gynecomastia, testicular shrinkage, infertility, and increased size of the prostate gland, which could prove to be cancerous. Women, on the other hand, show a usually different set of side effects, and those include a deepening of the voice, clitoral growth, hair loss on their head, and a decrease or a complete stoppage of periods altogether. Now, those are side effects that are prone to either men or women, but both men and women will deal with acne, a higher risk of tearing a tendon, liver damage, an increase in bad cholesterol or LDL, and a decrease in good cholesterol, HDL, high blood pressure, heart problems, anger, depression, and addiction. This alone, I think, would be enough to deter people from wanting to legalize these substances, because why would you want to legalize something that could cause irreversible and life-changing damages? People will forever find a way to get their hands on them, and I understand that. The legalization of a substance like this almost leads people to believe that they're not as bad as they seem, which is completely the wrong idea. There have been a number of studies done over the years that demonstrate the negative effects anabolic steroids can have on individuals. One such study that I took a look at showcased the negative effects that anabolic steroids can have on blood lymphocytes and DNA health. They took a group of 36 bodybuilders, 18 who have used anabolic steroids and 18 who haven't, and each one gave a blood sample. So the lymphocytes were separated from the rest of the blood sample and they were observed, and the group with the history of anabolic steroid usage, the tail length, DNA shape, and movement of the lymphocytes were all abnormal or increased. These factors suggest that a significant amount of damage has been done to their DNA. Another study looked at the effects that anabolic steroids can have on one's cardiovascular system. And the subjects who had a history of anabolic steroid usage all showed reduced left ventricular systolic function. Those who were on anabolic steroids at the time of the testing had worse results than those who had used and stopped. They also showed that anabolic steroid usage led to more coronary artery plaque, and the longer the usage of anabolics in the individual, the greater the plaque buildup, the higher the risk of heart issues later on in life. Another study, just to give you an idea on how detrimental these are to one's physical health, looked at anabolic steroids' effects on a user's sexual health and reproductive function. This study took over 500 participants, put them through a series of tests to determine the effects that the steroids have had on them, and looking at the results, the overwhelming majority of these participants stated that at some point, either during usage or after usage, they had been dissatisfied with their sexual health. Along with this, they showcased symptoms including a loss of sexual desire, erectile dysfunction, gynecomastia. The study was done looking at male participants, reduced orgasmic satisfaction, ejaculatory disorders, small testes, abnormal semen characteristics, and the multitude of them showcased a combination of many of these side effects. So not only are anabolic steroids dangerous to one's physical health, but they also impact the brain and one's mental health. A study that showed this looked at anabolic steroid users' tendency to use antidepressants. So they looked at bodybuilders who had used anabolic steroids and bodybuilders who hadn't used anabolic steroids. And those who had used anabolic steroids had a much higher tendency to rely on antidepressant drugs or other antipsychotic drugs as opposed to those who had never touched these banned substances. Another study saw that those using steroids were more likely to showcase symptoms of personality disorders such as narcissistic, antisocial, and non-planning impulsiveness as opposed to their natural counterparts. Another study took anabolic steroid users and then those who hadn't used steroids, and they used the Beck Anxiety Inventory and the Beck Depression Inventory to see how these substances affect one's mental health. And once again, we see that the users of anabolic steroids showcase significantly higher scores in both anxiety and depression. And so I believe that the main reason for this deterioration of mental health among those who use anabolic steroids is simply the fact that the brain ages faster when you use these substances. One study actually took a look in this and found that the brain age gap was much higher in anabolic steroid users. So this is just the difference between the chronological age of the brain and the predicted age of the brain. So the higher the brain gap, the larger the discrepancy is, the worse your brain has aged over time. And the longer that one uses these anabolic steroids, the larger the discrepancy in brain age gap eventually became. I mean, after hearing all of the detrimental effects that these drugs have on individuals, it doesn't make sense to legalize them and allow them for over-the-counter consumer purchase. And I think if hearing that the physical and mental side effects wasn't enough to convince you, then the effects that legalization of these drugs could have on the youth, I think, is something that everybody should be concerned with. So the use of anabolic steroids in the media has already impacted the youth in a concerning manner, and legalization would take it to another level, I believe. One effect of adolescent usage on anabolic steroids that doesn't affect a fully grown adult is stunted growth due to the maturing of bones happening at a quicker rate. Social media is so popular nowadays, and there's a number of influencers who are late teens, early 20s with millions of followers that are using these compounds and promoting them to the masses. And you got to think, a lot of their followers are in that high school age range, that 14 to 18, maybe college 18 to 22. They are not fully developed adults. And some of these influencers are promoting the usage of these substances to a young audience who in turn will be more influenced to take action and use them themselves. One example of this, you can see him in the bottom left corner, is International Federation of Bodybuilding professional Anton Ratushny. And Ratushny, he has over 300,000 followers on Instagram. He has a healthy following. And he made history, I believe, 2 years ago, becoming the youngest bodybuilder to ever earn their professional card. And he did this at the age of 19 years old. Now, most professional bodybuilders, they don't turn pro until, earliest mid-20s, but the majority of them late 20s to early 30s. So for Mr. Ratushny to do so at 19, it's an incredible achievement, but at the same time, it takes years and years and years and years to develop a physique like that. And to develop a physique as profound as his at such an early age requires multiple years of anabolic steroid usage, of course along with hard training and dieting, but he most likely began using anabolic steroids at a very early age, which is not good for health reasons, as I mentioned earlier. Chris Bumstead, who we have in the bottom right, he's considered one of the greatest professional bodybuilders of all time, and without a doubt the most popular at the moment. He has over 26 million followers on Instagram, and he earned his bodybuilding professional card at the age of 21. Now, once again, it takes years and years and years to develop a physique as impressive as that, and that includes years and years and years of anabolic steroid usage. I mean, since he turned pro, he's won 6 Mr. Olympia titles. He's gained an incredible following. He runs a very successful business, and many teenagers look up to him. And because their following is so profound, these two that I previously mentioned, Anton Ratushny and Chris Bumstead, are not actively promoting anabolic steroids. But through their actions and through their success, it's hard for a teenager to see the downside, because while they don't talk about the downsides of anabolic steroids, all they do is promote the success they have had using them. Now, one article that I read on Men's Health, it details the story of 2 high school age boys fascinated with 2 of the more popular fitness YouTubers today. And that's who we have in the upper left and the upper right. The upper left, we have the Trend Twins, and the upper right, we have Shane Stoffer, or as he's known on YouTube, Togi. Now, both of these influencers are in their early 20s, and once again have been abusing steroids since their teenage years. They've accumulated millions of followers. They showcase a lavish lifestyle. But on top of that, they actively promote the usage of steroids and how great they are. And it's something they constantly talk about in their videos. Once again, you have impressionable kids watching these influencers. And how could they not be led to believe that steroids leads to more money, leads to more success, leads to, big houses and fancy vacations and fast cars? Why would they think any differently? Because that is all that these influencers showcase. But glorifying these impressive physiques and what they can get you in life isn't new. We've seen it over the course of the years throughout movies and television and magazines, and social media is just taking it to another level. One of the other downsides of legalizing anabolic steroids, outside of the health effects that it can have, outside of the influence on youth that it will have, the legalization of steroids would completely ruin all athletic competition. Now, athletics are something that we all, maybe not all, but a lot of us can find comfort in, that a lot of us enjoy watching, and the legalization of these compounds would completely eliminate a fair game. So anabolic steroids are completely illegal within athletic competition, but they are also illegal for purchase within the U.S. Legalizing it would simply put the sports that we love in jeopardy. Not saying that these organizations, such as MLB, NFL, NBA, NHL, the Olympics, not saying that they would also soon legalize it, but if they're easier to get their hands on, who knows what's bound to happen. So one of the most prevalent examples of this comes within Major League Baseball's steroid era. There's no exact time period on it, but the majority of people say it was between the late 80s and then all the way until the late 2000s. So in the year 1991, the MLB banned the usage of anabolic steroids. However, league-wide testing didn't come into play until the year 2003. So this allowed the athletes to experiment and abuse performance-enhancing substances without consequence. What we saw in the steroid era was an increase in offensive production that we've never seen before and have never seen since league-wide testing has been implemented. Roger Maris set the single-season home run record of 61 all the way back in 1961. And it wasn't until the steroid era where nobody truly came particularly close. However, throughout the late 90s and early 2000s, that record was flirted with quite a bit. And it all came to a head in 1998 when Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa went on their infamous, home run record chase, and both broke Maris's record by a fair margin. Sosa would go on to hit 66, and McGwire would set the record with 70, which were unheard of until then. And the year prior to that, 1997, the MLB saw a record 13 players reach the 40 home run mark as well. So home runs are up, offensive numbers are up, and they're seeing these giant baseball players that they've never seen before. I mean, all you have to do is look at these guys before steroid usage and after, and it's a different ball game that they were playing. The craziest thing about this, however, is McGwire's record. While Maris's record lasted over 30 years, McGwire's record lasted 3. Barry Bonds came in 2001 and hit 73 home runs, which to this day is still the single-season record, albeit with an asterisk next to his name. McGwire would later come out and admit to the usage of androstenedione, which at the time was available for purchase at supplement shops around the country. However, it since has been recognized as an illegal substance and is not permitted in the use of professional sports because it does have substantial performance-enhancing effects. And so you would think, who wouldn't love offensive production? It's great, everybody likes to see home runs, but one of the true tragedies of the steroid era is that the record book that the MLB once possessed, which is historical in nature, the game's been around for over a century, it's now tainted with those who essentially cheated with performance-enhancing drugs. And the most obvious case of this, once again, comes when we look at home runs. The 500 home run marker is one of the most exclusive clubs any major league player can get into. Until the year 1996, only 15 players had ever reached that mark. But between the years 1998 and 2009, 10 more players reached the 500 home run marker. Of those 10, 6 of those individuals, McGwire, Sosa, and Bonds are 3 of them, have been linked to steroid usage. And then another reason how the steroid era has profoundly impacted Major League Baseball comes within the MLB Hall of Fame. You have players like Bonds, McGwire, Sosa, Roger Clemens, Gary Sheffield, all guys who have put up the numbers worthy of Hall of Fame consideration, all guys who never technically tested positive for anabolic steroids, but they're all being punished and they've all been blacklisted from the Hall of Fame. Their usage was known and it was publicized, but like I said, they never failed a sanctioned league-wide drug test. And they are 5 of the greatest players of all time, but will never be inducted due to their link to anabolic steroids. Now, I wouldn't have an issue with this if that standard was held to all players who were linked to steroid accusations. You have other guys who are in the Hall of Fame, such as David Ortiz and Mike Piazza, that were inducted. David Ortiz appeared on a list of players who failed the drug test due to anabolic steroids in 2003, but because the list was publicized illegally, he went without punishment. He went without anybody really tainting his name the same way they did to Bonds, the same way they did to McGwire, the same way they did to Sosa. And Mike Piazza also claimed to have used the same compound that McGwire used, androstenedione and ephedra. He said he only used these substances before drug testing became mandatory league-wide. He said this in his memoir. But so did the other players that I mentioned previously. So it makes for a confusing case that's impacted the history of the game, but more so it's tainted the credibility of baseball as a whole. Lance Armstrong, you can see in the right corner of this page, as an athlete who captured numerous Tour de France medals and captured the hearts of many when he came back from cancer to seemingly be better than he ever was before. But when he was popped for anabolic steroids, his name now lives in infamy, and people look at him as a completely different person than he was when he was beloved by all. Once again, a guy that's tainted the history of a sport, and you can give those titles to whoever came in second, whoever did it fair and square, but it's absolutely not the same in the long run. The Olympic Games are another industry where steroids have been prevalent. Testing has gotten better as the years have gone on, but they certainly haven't been fully eliminated from the games. This past Summer Olympics in Paris, there were almost 50 cases of athletes using performance-enhancing drugs, yet none of those, or either the cases were found out before the games began, or they were found out during and the athletes were removed from competition. But in the bottom left corner, you can see Ben Johnson winning the Olympic gold medal at the 1988 Seoul Games. Ben Johnson is a Canadian sprinter, and he was looking to capture gold at these 1988 Games over the American favorite, Carl Lewis. And these athletes have had several run-ins, and they were considered two of the best, but Lewis was thought to be number one. So in 1988, in the Olympic finals, Ben Johnson not only beat Carl Lewis, but he broke the all-time 100-meter dash record, running a 9.79 100-meter dash. Soon after, though, Johnson tested positive for the performance-enhancing drug stanozolol. Johnson, he was stripped of his medal, and he faced a 2-year ban from competition. But once again, you can't go back in history and take away the glory that he felt in that moment as somebody who cheated, taking it away from athletes that did it fair and square. Author Richard Moore, he wrote a book about this incident, and he was told by Ben Johnson's coach, Charlie Francis, that before PED usage, it was claimed that Johnson ran times in the 10 flat to 10.2 range, which in sprinting, when every millisecond counts, that's a far cry from the 9.79 that he ran at the Olympic Games. And then on top of this, when Johnson returned to sprinting 2 years after he was banned, he had nowhere near the same amount of success that he had previously experienced. So anabolic steroids within athletic competition, it has the potential to ruin one of the most popular industries within the U.S. It's not fair to legalize these compounds because their implication on the sports in whole would be profound, and they'd be felt throughout. And there'd be a number of athletes who don't want to put their bodies at the health risks using these compounds that would most likely not be able to compete with those who were using them. So, after looking at these three reasons, the health risks, the impact it'll have on the youth, and the impact it'll have on sport, it seems pretty clear to me that anabolic steroids should remain illegal, should remain off limits, and we should try and be as healthy as possible without the use of performance enhancers. Thank you for listening. I truly do appreciate it, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.